Yeah, that's one thing that I hate about tattoos is like when they fade, They look so sweet when you first get them, and then after about a year or so, it's like,
This one's one session.
Well, that's not bad.
It's very thick and still dark. Like, it looks pretty much like the week after I got it.
So what is that supposed to be?
That is my star sign. So, like, Taurus.
Oh.
Yeah. So, going off of that, hello everybody. Welcome back to the MuseTube podcast, episode 5 here. Today we're going to mostly be talking to you about the top 40 format, how it came to be, and sort of how it's sort of been running the music industry. Did a little bit of research coming into this one. There is a very good YouTube video called When Soundtracks Repeat, and it's by the channel Sideways. Definitely would recommend checking it out if you want to get a little bit more informative into the topic we're about to discuss. But before we get into that, how you doing?
Doing well.
Always gotta ask how you doing. Yeah.
Got my cup of tea.
Got your cup of tea. What kind of tea are we drinking? I think I'm drinking the same one as last time. Just
This is a chamomile. This one is watermelon zinger.
Really?
Yeah, it's a it's a summertime type of tea, and it's a little bit fruity. It's okay. I don't know. I always like the like when I say mild flavors, I mean like more of like the like. I mean, like, this is nature-based, but I'm talking, like, more like the chamomiles and, like, the, like, honey nectar type teas and, like,
Sort of the more pure tea.
Yeah, and, like, I remember last time we were talking about matcha tea, and you're like, yeah, if I like dirt.
It's just a very earthy tone, So, yeah, we're coming to you talking about the top 40,
right.
Sort of how it came to be, and the story around that is kind of interesting. So back in the 50s, the radio would not play the same song within a 24-hour period. So that song would not be played again until 24 hours after it was originally played, because they didn't want people to get bored of music and stuff,
Right.
And so they thought that if they played it more, people would start to dislike the song. But these two guys, names are Todd Storrs and Bill Stewart, who were radio workers in Omaha, Nebraska. Yeah, very random place where it's come from. Thinking about the origin of the top 40.
Yeah, I'm not thinking like it's like I was thinking like Memphis.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So those two guys were working across from a bar or something. I think it might have been like a diner. Mm-hmm. And they had one of those old jukeboxes or something.
Yeah.
And people would be playing the same song multiple times throughout their time there. Mm-hmm. So they were like, okay. So if you let people choose what to play, they'll actually play that same song more times. And so then they started to do that. They started to take the radio station, be a little bit different, and play the same song multiple times in a day, maybe like once like every hour or so.
Man.
Something like that. And then their ratings went up because people would then be listening, being like, I know what kind of music they'll probably play. And so then that sort of started to generate the whole radio stations playing the things that people want to hear.
Right.
And want repeating a lot. And so part of the reason why that is a thing is because of this idea of how music, and to a mental level, is impacted by repetition. Mm-hmm. So there's 2 books in the video. The first one is called The Sound Machine Inside the Hit Factory by John Seabrook. And he is talking about sort of how he discovered this story of how the format came to be is those 2 guys who found it. Mm-hmm. He references another book called On Repeat by Elizabeth Helmut Margulis, I want to say. But she is a distinguished professor and director of the Music Cognition Lab at the University of Arkansas. And so in her book, she starts to talk about how I actually did... I wanted to conduct a little bit of an experiment about this after my first time hearing the video months ago, which is it's based off of this idea that a song that you don't like, the more you hear it, the more it'll become familiar and you'll start to like it more. That's not necessarily like you'll start to like necessarily that genre maybe or that sound, but just that specific song.
Right.
And so I never was able to conduct like a big experiment from this, but I asked one friend to pick a song that he hated. Mm-hmm. And then whenever he goes to start playing music, that's the first song he has to play. Ooh. And so he had to hear it over and over and over again. So I asked him, how do you feel about this song now? And he's like, well, I'll tell you that I didn't necessarily appreciate it more as a song to listen to, but I started to understand why I didn't like it as much, and I started to understand the things that I do like about it. And I feel like that's a similar thing because there are songs that like my friends would play where the first time I heard it, I'd be like, that's a little weird. Right. But then part of you kind of wants to play it again. Right. And then over a while, it starts to become a song you really like.
I feel like there's also the opposite effect of that, though, where it's like you maybe start to like deconstruct a song and you're like, oh, God, I hate this because it's so easily built and it's just like, oh, my God.
And that is possible. Another thing is if that goes on for too long,
right? Which
what happens often with the top 40s. Is like, on the radio, like maybe you like Cake by the Ocean. The first time I heard that, well, I'm just going to say this is a perfect example because the first time I heard that song, I thought it sounded interesting and kind of cool. And then I found out that it was on the top 40, and so I would hear it a couple more times, and I started to really love it.
And you find out its actual meaning.
Well, not that. Just after about a year, I didn't want to hear that song like ever again.
Yeah, that's an interesting song.
And it's just one of those things where, so like a little bit of repetition will get you to start to love something, but a little too much will start to ruin it.
Yep.
And a quote from the video, referencing page 15 of her book On Repeat, it says, in a 2012 study, I asked participants without special musical training, everyday music listeners being, to listen to excerpts from challenging contemporary art music and rate it on a 7-point scale how much they'd enjoyed each excerpt. Unbeknownst to the participants, mixed in with the original excerpts were adaptations of them. In these adaptations, segments of music had been extracted and reinserted to add repetition of some material. Listeners rated the immediate and delayed repetition versions as reliably more enjoyable, more interesting, and more likely to have been composed by a human artist rather than generated randomly by a computer.
The interesting thing about that is, like, as a music listener, like, I don't really listen to much radio nowadays.
Right.
But like when I was listening to radio a lot, like before there was like streaming and like YouTube and stuff like there is now, and even like Apple Music, when I would hear a repeated song that I like, if I was like listening to the radio for like a long duration of time, and I would always get kind of annoyed where I was like, man, I literally just heard that song like 45 minutes ago. Like,
right.
So it's interesting to me to think that like people back then wanted to hear that, because like sometimes like for like radio stations you're like, all right, give me some new music to listen to, give me something that I haven't heard yet, and it's like, like especially the top 40 music, like today's now hits, as like there's a lot of repeating to that, because like every hour they'll have like this is the top 10 of 12 o'clock or whatever, you'll hear like countdown and stuff like that, and so it's like I hear the same songs and their playlists are just the same every couple hours,
And so that's where I think it starts to differ. Like, well, do you ever find yourself after you find new music and you download it, you listen to that song a lot over the course of a period of time, and then you sort of stop listening to it?
Yeah.
I think that's part of what happens with Top 40 is that, like, when they start to find that certain songs, people change the radio station, that's when they'll probably start to change it.
That's fair.
Like, the song could be out for a while,
mm-hmm.
and then people will start to like it more, and then once it becomes, like, popular, that's when Top 40 starts to just cram it down your throat.
Right.
To get people to listen to it.
Right.
Because that's when everyone is starting to discover it. So.
Right, and they want to be the station that's playing it, oh, we got to check out this station because they're the one that plays the song,
Right.
I feel like radio stations, though, in general, are just going to end up, like, becoming obsolete. It's just going to be talk show radio. Because nobody, the only people that I think that listen to radio nowadays are people that have like a Sirius XM subscription,
right?
Again, which is a form of streaming.
Pretty much, yeah.
But even with Sirius XM, I get annoyed with that because like I listen to, I think it's like Channel 36 is the alt station, and like the people that talk on there just annoy the hell out of me. Like, just stop talking. Like, I just want to hear music. Like, they always, like, tell us these, like, little stories and stuff. I'm like, okay, some of them are kind of cool. Like, if they're, like, facts about the band or whatever, then it's, like, okay. But, like, I really don't care if you saw this band as your first concert when you were in middle school. Like, stuff like that, it's just, like, it's not necessary,
Yeah. And, like, the radio stations I'm starting to like more is one that I always go back to because I use it as a way to, like, find new music.
Mm-hmm.
When I've, like, sort of run dry is 88.9, and it's the MSU college radio station.
That's a good radio
and that's because they're pretty good because they don't play it like off of a playlist. They'll do a lot of like
the radio
submissions and radio hosts, and they'll play like just music that they want to play. And they also have like when they do have they're like scheduled like top, it's their top 5 at 5. Yeah, so like that's why I think radio stations like that will continue to keep going.
What's interesting about 88.9 too is every single day of the week at a certain time between like the hours of like 7 and like 11, they have a different subgenre of music.
Yeah,
like on Thursday nights, the Torch and Twang show.
Yeah, Torch and Twang.
Yeah, dude, that's good. Holy
have
crap!
Hours of Power. They have what do they call it? Is it Asian Music Monday?
Something like that. Yeah.
Where they play Japanese and K-pop.
They have all kinds of different.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
So any of you radio listeners, definitely check out 88.9. They get a little like hipster indie.
Yeah.
Like sometimes like I don't know. I know Mac DeMarco is like popular, but
I love me some Mac.
I don't know. Sometimes, but like when you hear like Mac DeMarco multiple times in a day, you're like, I don't want to feel like I'm in a fever dream right now.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how I would describe him, like fever dream like music, because it's so weird.
It is weird, but it's also like arguably really good.
It's
arguably really different than a lot of other. I mean, it's so hard to categorize him as alternative indie.
Yeah.
Because his music is so like, it's almost cultish, in a way.
Yeah.
It's
actually,
like it's like
true.
Radiohead, but of the indie scene. Like, you know how they have like this like kind of cult following behind. Like, for example, some people are like they like listen to Radiohead and they're like, I don't get it. And they don't understand like what's so great about the music. Like people will be like, oh, you know, like this music is so good, and then people are like, I don't get it. It's like that same thing with Mac DeMarco in a way. There's like people that love him, and there's like people that just like can't stand him. You know,
it's not that I can't stand him. It's just like
it's just different.
Yeah, it's different, and I understand that there are parts that I don't understand about it. But I look at that like just because I don't understand, I don't think it's bad. It's just I don't think it's bad at all.
Right.
I don't like look at people when they say they like Mac DeMarco. I'm not like you don't like good music. I just say, oh, you probably just don't like my kind of music.
Yeah, I hate that as like kind of like a backhanded like insult. Like, oh, like you don't like it because you just can't comprehend it. Like I hate when people are like that. Like, what do you mean? Like everybody comprehends everything at their own way. Like what my experience from a song is completely different. Like for example, one song for me could make me feel happy and joyous, and then the same song for you could make you feel emotional and like, you know, upset or whatever, you know.
A lot of my favorite songs though are ones where you can feel it in many different ways.
Yeah.
Like maybe like this is gonna sound weird, but if you're like alone, maybe it'll like make you feel sad.
Yeah.
But when you're with people and you're all sort of enjoying it together, instead that sadness turns into sort of like a we all just love this. We're all loving it together.
For real.
That's why I really want to do an album review soon.
Yeah.
I'm not doing soon.
Mac DeMarco just put out a new album not that long ago.
A new album?
Review that.
All right, we'll keep that on the list.
I'm gonna have to try to be like unbiased about it though, because I'm gonna have implicit bias because I already like him.
That's the thing. Well, okay, so there's like this one album I'm not gonna mention. I've already talked to you about it, and we're hoping to have a guest. We're gonna start doing guest speakers, I think, on here coming up soon. And one of them is someone who I want specifically for this album review. Uh-huh. And it is an album that I love. It is my favorite album of all time. Mm. So there is sort of a bias with it. But part of the reason it's my favorite album is not because I just think it sounds good, but because I like the way that it sounds good, you know. And so, like, I don't know. I think it's a good album to talk about as musicians because there's a lot of stuff to talk about in it and share back and forth.
Right.
Anyway, so you've got like radio stations starting to play the same music over and over, and then that starts to become like very popular. And so that is sort of what has driven, like, you know, people who make a lot of money do it because they see areas to make a lot of money, and that's sort of what Top 40 is. So like this is the thing is I want to try and give respect to pop music, but in our current modern music industry, pop music is very much just a business model. It's not actually music. Yeah. And so what you start to see is the way Top 40 works for a lot of it, from the business side, you get like, since it is also just popular music, you get a lot of like, I would consider more true artists, not necessarily just like real musicians, because I don't think like, I wouldn't say Shawn Mendes is a true artist. Yeah. And that's because I know he does write some of his own songs and stuff, but a lot of it has been written by other people.
Yeah, I hate that.
And stuff, and it's not like complex music, and I think that there are certain artists where you can tell where it's coming from, and Shawn Mendes I think is one where he got pushed into being a musician more than he's, you know, if you know his story maybe you can like correct me on that, but just from what it seems,
dude, I feel you on that.
Yes,
though.
But artists like Adele or Bruno Mars, where you can tell that they're just very talented people, and they create music that people like, but it's also driven from a more passion-based standpoint.
Right.
Like everybody like loves at least some Bruno Mars song.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of his songs are also very different. They all sort of fit into this spectrum that gets on pop.
Right.
Where it's sort of either very R&B, very hip hop, or very pop.
Yeah.
But he does a lot of stuff within those genres.
I feel like I'm like a purist in that regard, though. Like if I was gonna be like a pop musician, or an I always side with alternative music because that's like, I don't know. I always increasingly say that alternative and indie music is becoming the new pop music. Like I think
it is kind of in a way.
And from the purist point of view, I would not want to take songs that I didn't write. Like, I would obviously take outside constructive criticism and say, hey, I need to change, you should change this lyric here. But the overarching, like, melody, progression, or whatever, like, I would not want to perform somebody else's song. And I know that's, like, so common.
Right.
But, like, if you guys are fans of Modest Mouse, you should check out the album Good News for People Who Love Bad News. So that whole album and the ideology behind it is like the idea that there are so many people that don't get the credit that they deserve because there's somebody in front of them that are claiming the credit. And I forget one of the tracks off of it, but I think it's called Blame It on the Tetons. And basically in that song they talk about like these songwriters get no credit, no like hardly any royalties to the song that they wrote, but yet it's becoming iconicized and popularized by pop musicians. Like I had a really deep, profound respect for Ed Sheeran at the time because he wrote all his music, and now like he used to be all just really raw acoustic. Wrote his own music, and now he's
kind of getting trapped in that top 40 format.
Yeah, I know.
Which is disappointing because like he is one artist that I didn't necessarily like all of his music, but I was always like he still is.
Right.
When he goes and plays concerts, he's still showing off how talented he is, but it is that songwriting perspective that I feel like he might be losing. Like Shape of You.
Yeah, I can't stand that song.
I can't stand that song. And it's not because it's not catchy. It is catchy, but it's just you can see that that's like one of the major points that Ed Sheeran lost, like the true Ed Sheeran.
Right.
Because if you hear that song, you're definitely like, it's good. And it's like, you can tell it's sort of like an Ed Sheeran style.
Right.
But
it's just like
every part of its foundation, you can see like just top 40 written all over it.
Yeah. And like, the thing about it is like, if you look at his roots too, how did he become popular? Through the singer-songwriter type music. And like just the raw acoustic guitar and just vocals. And now it's just like, I don't know.
Well, and so part of what's sort of spurred me to make this our topic is because we were discussing it in our last episode when we were going through the news articles. And Taylor Swift is one where the interesting thing about her is from my perspective, she seems like someone who had like sort of the Ed Sheeran pure talent got her to where she is, and she's sort of starting to fall into that. But at the same time, when I look at her music, it may like sort of be like the top 40 style, but I can still see that it's stuff that I feel like she is completely the one writing and sort of artistically like choosing what happens.
It just sucks because like now, especially with top 40 music. And, like, I would even argue, like, maybe even, like, in the early 2000s is when this was starting to maybe become more prevalent. Where it's more about selling the person's image than it is more or less about the music. So it's like I can sell the sellability of the attractiveness of the person and not necessarily on their music.
And that's sort of something, so that's perfect that you brought that up because it's something that I wanted to get back into is when you mentioned Indian alternative becoming sort of like a new sort of like top 40 is because I think it's such like a stylistic like
it's trendy.
The new style for like people is like you've got sort of like two main styles right now in mainstream media. You've got like the hip hop like super brand like stuff, very clean, like sort of lots of white and black, just like very you've got that look like Nikes, Adidas,
Jordans,
that sort of stuff. Yeah, exactly. You've got like sort of that look, and then you've also got the sort of like I would call that the forward moving fashion, and then in sort of like the indie world, this sort of look you're getting is like sort of lots of skater stuff, rolled up jeans with long socks and stuff.
I like those.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's a good look. Lots of like dyed hair, piercings, all that stuff. That's starting to become like
beat a doobie baby.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
And
I
like,
love her, dude.
but
Oh god.
but also don't tell me that like her, Clairo, like sort of snail mail,
like
girl in
Clairo,
red,
too.
they all sort of are also sort of in that same style.
Yeah, they are. But you know what the thing about it is like it's not like the idea of alternative indie music when it really started making like a big popular movie. I would say almost maybe like in the 90s, like when grunge and all that stuff kind of out. Because that was
like,
considered like alternative.
Sort of like Nirvana being like sort of the start
of
that in a way.
And it was like really basically like this idea of saying like fuck off to the normal pop music.
Right.
Like I'm not going to adhere to that type of lifestyle. I'm going to be what I am, you know, and kind of be not necessarily like dirty, but just have a more edgy or rough look.
Right.
And that's attractive. Because it's really seeing people as they are, and they're not like being all dolled up and like, you know, being all. Not, I don't want to use the term fake, but just not.
It's instead of playing off of things that you think people want to be, it's putting all of your eggs in the basket of all the things that make you you.
Right.
So instead of being like, it's just 100% authenticity.
Right.
Anything that seems like it would be weird, you just fully embrace that and make that your brand.
And that's the appeal.
Yeah, and that is the appeal of it to me as well.
I mean, I know we're kind of talking about Mac DeMarco a little bit, but like Mac DeMarco's like got so much money that there's so many things that he could do to himself cosmetically. Like he's got this big gap in his front teeth, and he that's his iconic thing. Right. And so like you just see him as a person, and like okay, he's unshaven, maybe he hasn't showered in a few days, but it really gives this appeal to like recognizing people for them as they are. And like even though these people are popular and they probably have like a lot of money and they have the ability to invest in themselves and buy all these things or whatever, they don't do that because they want to still live a normal lifestyle and not lavishly.
And so now I'm going to bring up another thing that I wanted to bring up with style is that you look at each genre, they each have sort of their own very loosely term using this, so like their own top 40 style, which is sort of the business model. And so the reason top 40 is the way it is because all music taste kind of lands on a spectrum. Mm-hmm. And so sort of like your pop music and stuff, which is another thing we brought up, is the understanding of music and how hard it is to sort of wrap your head around how crazy it gets. Right. Pop music is very much the one that just reaches most people. Right. And that's why it's sort of moved up.
Well, and it's also so much more easier in nature to understand.
But at the same time, like what you consider like modern pop started with, you know, like groups like people like Michael Jackson and stuff.
Which that music was complex.
And that's what I'm saying.
The crazy
so
thing.
That's the thing is, and then that's why that complex music where you had like the true artists and you still have your outliers like, you know, the Bruno Mars and Adele. Right. But the main thing is people are trying to exploit that style for the money. Right. And that's why you get your artists like, I don't know, let's say, it's hard because I don't want to unintentionally, like, sort of, like, you know, shit on some artists.
Dude.
But, like, sort of like a Selena Gomez.
Oh, yeah, dude,
like,
I don't think that she's
I don't think she's a bad singer. I think she's got, like, a lot of talent. Yeah. The thing is, though, I feel like she's kind of being held up by other people. Not in the sense where I don't think she could do anything, but I think she's caught in like that top 40 web, and especially coming from like Disney.
Oh yeah, their contracts.
Like she literally, like I'm not saying that she doesn't have any talents for herself, but I'm saying the way that her career has been built is she's been pushed up through it.
Right.
She didn't do like the Taylor Swift model of like going out to as many sort of like pageants and shows and stuff, and sort of gaining that. She just sort of got chosen for a show. The show became popular. Then she was told get into music.
Right. And stuff. It's like Miley Cyrus and Hannah
exactly
Montana.
the same thing with her and stuff. And,
and
that
premise was even based on music.
And that's the thing is these people are talented people like Demi Lovato. Justin Bieber is kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, because he kind of grew up.
Because he was more of like he's more of like a social success story, which is a whole different kind of thing. But you know, like all these, especially like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon stars that are just getting pushed into like the mass media presence. They're like just talented people that are sort of being used for what you are and who you are and your image being used just to make money.
Well, you take those three people that you just mentioned. So you take like, okay, well actually two because we'll say
let's put Shawn Mendes in there too since we mentioned him earlier.
So if we think about like Selena Gomez, Demi Lovato, Justin Bieber, Shawn Mendes, all these people, did I forget anyone?
No, that's pretty much the main people we talked about.
What do those things all have in common?
They're all very attractive.
They're very attractive. They're nice to look at.
Yeah.
You know, and that's sellability. Now, if you take somebody who's like Mac DeMarco, who's not the most attractive guy in the world, if you put them next to them, there's no way that he's ever going to get brand deals through clothing lines or different companies like that, unless they're specifically going for his look.
Right.
But, like, the whole overarching point is that, like, attractiveness always outsells ugliness. And so, like, we've kind of, like, gotten into this discussion where, like, these people are not even really used, or they're as far as my concern, they're not even being used for their talents or their abilities. It's more about just selling the image. Like, think about it. Like, when Justin Bieber was really young, he had a huge fandom of young girls that liked him. And what was the biggest thing? You saw Justin Bieber backpacks, T-shirts, pencils, all this stuff.
His look, dude.
Yeah, it's all his look. It had nothing
Justin
to do.
Bieber haircut is a thing.
Yeah, it's a freaking meme now.
Yeah.
Like, but I mean, like, just in general, like, none of that even had to do with anything of his music. Did you even see those things and see any lyrics on it or anything? No, it was just his face. Right. Posters, right. Movies, whatever.
And that's interesting. Another group that I wanted to bring up, and again, not throwing any flame, but One Direction. Because they're literally a story that, like, even more so than the other people, like, they're literally just a couple of guys who are pretty good at singing and could be taught, and then they're just put together. And, like, then these aren't things that people are trying to hide.
Jonas Brothers.
If you look... Well, I feel like the Jonas Brothers are a little bit more from, like... Because they're play instruments and they are actual...
They're attractive,
like,
though.
Yeah, they're like a boy band, and they definitely got roped into that. But I think that they are sort of more closer to the Outliers in terms of how they've all, like, been able to go on like a solo group, or like, I don't know, like with DNCE, like his band, like I don't think that was pushed by like any groups. I think he just found a couple like musician friends, and he just kind of built himself up, carried him off of what like the Jonas Brothers wave,
right?
And so yeah, like back to the groups, like you've got like One Direction, where it's literally just this group of guys that were put together to become like
iconic.
Yeah, iconic. And you're looking sort of more for like an archetype than an actual like artist. And part of the reason why I respect Harry Styles is because he's also part of the Outliers, where he sort of went on his own and learned instruments and sort of learned more about like musicality. I'm not going to say that he's like some genius artist, but I do think his songs are very catchy. He's very good at making like sort of pop songs. So I find him interesting in the sense where he's sort of like someone who learned from the top 40 format and sort of is able to sort of incorporate it into his own sort of style and kind of create like a type of music that is very much him and very much unique, but also like everyone will probably find something on that album, like his most recent one, that they love.
My frustration comes to the fact that like that type of music, and I know I'm like so biased about it, but like, and I'll be the first to admit that, is like, maybe we shouldn't judge on complexity, but I just do.
Right.
But like for me, like there are so many songs where it's literally just 3 chords and the melody is so flatline. There's no linear, or there's no like continuity to the album or to the melody or whatever, and it's just like very flat. And so like when I listen to like my classical guitar stuff and I'm like trying to actively learn this and play this, and I'm like, even the jazz stuff, it's like, this shit is hard.
Yeah.
Like, it's not freaking easy. You have to spend so much time on it. And, like, you take a good year or even, like, 6 months to a year of learning the basics of music and, like, in a pop sense, and you can write a million tunes just with knowing, like, such a fraction of knowledge about music. And it's just frustrating because it's like, you take the music that's really overly arching and complex, it will never outsell the simplistic value of pop music. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, but if you like, you start to realize this, like once you start to get really good at understanding music and analyzing it, you like your tastes to start to develop, and you're like, okay, I used to like this pop music, and you're like, oh my god, this is totally shitty. Like, not that it's bad, but just its complexity. And the thing is like, even like when we were talking about this earlier, like if you look at like the Beatles or like Michael Jackson, they were considered pop musicians, but their music was so complex.
Yeah, and
it's not easy.
So like different and like ahead of its time and stuff.
Exactly. Like if you look at Beatles music, like their chord progression, like they're it's not just 2 or 3 chords in a progression.
Yeah, no, they're doing different things. The song structure is always
tough.
Different.
Yeah.
That's another thing about the pop songs is like, and what I was gonna say is with like, I was also gonna bring up metal and stuff with the style.
Oh yeah.
Is like you start to see groups like I don't know if I want to throw Metallica under the bus that much, but you know, like your typical thrash metal, a lot of it ends up being very much the same and in the same structure. You kind of know what to expect from which song. It's kind of just more what are the notes going to be for that section. You're kind of like, okay, so we're starting off with the verse, so another chorus is going to come, and then probably another verse.
It's all typical.
And then there'll be another chorus, and then a bridge. And so you're like, I know what's going to happen. I just want to see what is within those areas.
Right.
That's part of the reason why the album that I'm talking about, that I'm super excited to share, is different, because these guys do some weird stuff with most of their songs. Their verses are not the same.
Right.
They're different. They're different.
Well, so. And but the thing is the complexity in that music is so much more above pop music, you know.
Right.
And so, like, you know, that's hands itself to the argument where it's like, just because it's simple in nature, does that mean that it's not good? Or if it's because it's complex in nature? I mean, because there is music that is so complex that I don't understand. Like 12-tone music. Yeah. Which is like, you have a system of 12 tones and you can only use them in a certain order and an arrangement. And it's just like, it's over my head because it's so based mathematically, and it's not based on spontaneousness of writing music or, you know, coming up with a good melody. It's just based on mathematics, which I can't get with that.
And that's where, like, I want to, like, that's the thing, is I want to, like, this is what I want to encourage for people, is like the idea that just because something is popular doesn't mean that it's the best. And right. You know, music, I try to stay away from terms like the best, or like these are the best, or like these are great, because that's so, like, subjective.
But the thing is like, pop culture doesn't necessarily just bleed into music. It's in movies. It's in film.
Oh yeah.
It's in
like
books.
The action movie format.
Yeah.
Lens flares, super close-ups. You have like an older guy who's super wise, and he's like against everything that the action stars are doing. You know.
Yeah, there's there's just certain trends that I can't get on, and I kind of date myself, honestly, because like there'll be certain things where, like, you know, somebody will say something. Well, did you see this on this? And I'm like, I don't watch that shit. Like, in my opinion, there's so many other ways to better spend your time than watching. Probably gonna annoy people or piss people off, but watch like some kind of program that's just like ridiculous. Like, and I know like there's probably a bunch of people, but my mom, love her, but she watches all this marriage television. I'm talking like The Bachelorette, The Bachelor, the Married at First Sight shit. And I'm like, Mom, why do you watch this shit? Like, what do you get out of this? There's no value in this for me. Like, it's drama. And you know why they do this? They do this because they know drama and confrontation makes money. Like, if I want to create drama, I can create drama so much more easier than watching on a program, and I'm actively helping them make money off of this by watching it. Yeah. You know, and like, I'd rather watch a nature documentary. I'd rather watch Blue Planet. You know, and like, I think the most important thing about getting a better understanding and appreciation of anything that you're watching or viewing is really understand it in its most basic form. So if you want to appreciate music, understand what's going on beyond just the surface level things. Okay, I like this melody. Well, why do you like this melody? Is it because of the certain intervallic relationship between the pitches? Is it the chord progression that you like? You know, why? And then that's how your mind expands.
That's what I always try to ask people. Like, I have friends who are sort of more like favoring of pop and stuff, and I'll try and play them like a rock or a metal song, which, you know, I like all genres, but I'll do this as like an experiment. And then if they sort of start to like it, I'll be like, okay, cool. And if they sort of start to dislike it, I'll be like, okay, but why? Right. And I'm not saying it like I'm not trying to beat them. I'm not trying to make them like it. I'm just trying to see, like, I'm just trying to make them think about it. Think about why they don't like it. Right. And then think about why that song might be different. Like, you know, people who have heard like a bad Screamo song, those are people that say that, like, Screamo is just like banging stuff together. Right. It's like, sure, there are instances like that. Right. But that's not the whole. I think that might also be a side effect of the top 40, is that people think that genres are so set in stone. Right. Like, when you try and learn about like all the genres of like rock, like it's like a tree, dude. There's so many different branches. Right. And so I think I just want people to like try to appreciate things for what they are. Try to think about why you don't like it, and then try and see if you can find other instances. Like, you know, if you only hear top 40, you're gonna think that all pop music is bad, but then you might find some people who are doing interesting things with pop, who are trying to progress the genre and stuff. You know, there's also this ignorance that comes along with it, where people don't necessarily want to have a deeper understanding of it. Yeah. You know, and I found that to be more typical too, because like,
opinions are only as valid as an opinion can be if you have facts to back it up. Like, I think an opinion can become a fact if it's backed up with facts. You can say, this song is good based on these elements. This artist uses this, and this. This is a list of why this song is good. The issue with it is, though, is like some people, they don't want to go beyond that. And like, I don't know who said it, but there's like, maybe you know, but who's the guy that said question everything? Do you know who that is? I can't remember who. It's like a philosopher.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like Greek philosopher. I don't know. But anyway, it's like this idea that you really should, like, because if you're not questioning everything, you're not ever learning anything. And so, like, I'm really, one of the biggest things that I have this philosophy on, and this just goes beyond music, is I never want to stop learning. Like, I want to really kind of, like, have the idea of lifelong learning in my life. And, like, if I ever feel like I've arrived at the destination, I've already failed. You know?
Right.
And that's not, like, me being philosophical or anything, but, like, I just really do feel like, for example, like, you know, people say, oh, you have music degrees, you go to school for college, you get these music degrees. It's like, yeah, but I have learned so much more outside of music school than I have learned. Right. Like, I've learned how to treat things like a business. I've learned how to practice on my own and not have guidance. I've learned how to be more efficient with my time. I've learned how to talk to people about how to obtain gigs, how to get projects, you know, and do these types of things. So these are things that you're not taught in education, which is lackluster in that way, you know?
And that's why, like, too many people, like, we have friends who we talk about this with, where they only learn what they're going to be told to learn. Yeah. They never try and learn.
They never try to expand it.
Yeah.
And you're at such a huge disadvantage. Like, one of the things that I'm really, really interested in, I keep grabbing this like this is a prop. I keep grabbing. I'm finished my tea here, but I keep talking as if I'm like giving a speech. I've still got mine here too. I got a couple sips left. One of the things that I'm really, really interested in is world music. And not just westernized music.
That's another thing. Always try and listen to foreign music.
Yeah.
Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it's not bad music. That's another thing. Big thing for me is lyrics aren't music. Lyrics
it's poems
are just poetry that you're singing.
Right.
That you're applying. And so that's why when people say stuff like, I don't understand it, that doesn't mean it's bad. You still got instruments to listen to, you've got melodies to listen to, you've got so many things to listen to. You don't have to understand what you're hearing.
Right. You know what's interesting about that claim though is like so John Cage was this composer in like the late 20th century, early 20th century. I think he died like in the 1960s or so. I could be wrong. But anyway, he's a really, really interesting guy because his whole philosophy, he was a composer, a theorist, and musician, and his whole philosophy about music, and you should look this up. He's got this symphony called Symphony 333 or 343, and then he also has this other piece called Waterworks. They're really, really interesting. You can find them online. Symphony 333 is this idea that music can be anything that is sound related, and I'll get to that about Waterworks as well. So in Symphony 33, and it's really, really ironic, so you can look this up on YouTube and say Symphony 333, and you'll see somebody walk out on stage, sit at front of a piano, and have a timer out, and they will time it. And for exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds, there is no playing, there is no music. It is this idea and thought that sound around us, the space of the auditorium, maybe people ruffling in their seats or coughing, is sound. Now, in his piece called Waterworks, it's really, really interesting. It's in black and white. You can find it on YouTube. You should watch it. It's all about sounds that are not necessarily in a pitch register, but things that are rhythmically timed. So, like, the clinking of this, my coffee cup, could be considered music because it's a rhythmic value. And it's a pitch. It's not necessarily a pitch, but it is a sound. So it's this whole idea. So he's got like all this crazy stuff that he does in this video, and he like runs water, then he like hits this clock, and then like he's got a bathtub filled with water and like slaps the water, and like it's just all this like random sound. And to like anybody who's like a purist of like classical music, you're like, what the hell is this? But it's so interesting. So it really lends this argument, and it's like, think about it. How many times in music, have you heard things that sound really cool that you never would have thought have been played in music? For example, like in the song by Neil Young, Harvest Moon, he's got this one guy on stage that he's got a rug and a broom, and he goes, and it's like you never would have thought that was so cool. You know, washboards and stuff.
2 examples I want to bring up. Before those examples, though, say the name of that guy you're...
John Cage. So
John Cage.
John Cage. So again, the pieces are called Symphony 333 and Waterworks.
Okay.
Really, really interesting.
Cool.
Sorry. Go ahead. No,
just 2 examples you made me think of. One, have you ever seen Stomp? That show. It's like a percussion show where they take like brooms, Tic Tac bottles, big drums, like steel drums. I don't know if you can find it on YouTube, but I saw it at the Wharton Center with my family.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Stomp.
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
No, I haven't seen it, but I know what you're talking about.
So yeah, they're making sounds like there was one with like one of the coolest beats that I heard throughout that show is they made it with Tic Tacs.
Oh, interesting.
Like a Tic Tac container.
Okay.
And they were like shaking it like it's a maraca or something.
That's cool.
So that just made me think of that. Like you can make music out of just random stuff. And another one, referencing SpongeBob here.
Oh, it's a jelly.
You know no, it's the one. Remember the episode Band Geeks or whatever, and they're like Squidward like asks everyone like what instruments do you all play, and he goes, is mayonnaise an instrument?
Yeah. I
saw a video of a guy who took different sound samples from mayonnaise, like sticking his finger into the jar, slapping like a piece of butter with mayonnaise on it with a knife, and he takes all these different sounds and puts them together and uses mayonnaise to make a song. Make a song out of the different sounds he made with mayonnaise.
Yeah, I mean you can do so much. Like it's amazing that when he first came out with that, it was like groundbreaking for people because everybody always had this idea that no, music is considered a collection of pitches and how you play them, whether it's ha 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 whatever. And so like it was this idea that anything that creates a sound can be considered music. Now there's some people that even pushed that further and started kind of going, there's like, schools of thoughts on these people. Like there's like, if you look at John Cage, there's a bunch of other theorists that have come after him who kind of expand on his ideas. But it's a little bit too far out for me. Like I can definitely like, there are certain things that I could think that would be sounding cool in a song. Like, this tapping of my cup or whatever. Like I could see how that could be
the cowbell, for example.
Yeah.
And so now I want to ask you then, the difference between the things that I brought up and that Symphony 333 is, it seems like in Symphony 333 it's very much just the sounds. The ones that I brought up are applying those sounds to music theory,
right,
in terms of like the rhythm and everything. So does music just have to be sounds applied with music theory and with musical structure in mind and
that was the
laws
thing
of music?
That was the thing about with John Cage, because his argument was that any sound could be considered music. Your footsteps walking across the floor, the flushing of a toilet, because it's a sound, it's an audible sound that has a distinction. It can be considered music. Now, I don't know as he went as far to say, well, it has to be in a rhythmic context, but I mean certainly with his Waterworks, it was all very rhythmic because he had a stopwatch where he was timing everything. It's like, okay, at 33 seconds, I have to hit this bell or whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, it's very interesting stuff because like people probably thought he was like drunk because probably. Like I remember my music history teacher at the time was telling us a story that like people when they would go see a symphony or whatever, they're expecting to see a symphony, like okay, orchestra or whatever. And like these people would go and see John Cage and they were like so blown away, like not in a good way, but no, like they were so confused, like what the hell is going on? This is not music.
What did I pay for?
Right, and that was his whole argument that like any single sound or noise could be considered music. And the funny thing is too is this kind of lends itself into soundscapers.
Okay.
So like I was gonna mention this too. So you know how like this is really common in scary movies, where they have soundscapers and sound designers, where it's not really necessarily music by our standards, but like the idea of nails on a chalkboard, or like those scenes where it's like those like windy howling trees and like those kind of like sounds like that. It's not technically music, it's just a sound, but it's an effect. And so that was, again, kind of this whole idea about, like, yeah, that's music. And so you see this. So there are people that are not necessarily musicians, but they're called soundscapers.
Okay.
Have you ever seen those videos where, like, somebody's maybe, like, walking across the beach or whatever, and you see the behind-the-scenes people adding those sound effects in that? Where they have, like, really, really sensitive mics, and they're, like, stepping on.
Yeah, I've
or
seen
they're,
stuff like that.
Crunching a bag of Doritos.
For video games or, like,
sound
animation
designers
and stuff.
Yeah. And it's really cool. Like, imagine that, to think about that as a job. So what do? It's like, well, I record sounds.
I took these boots and I did stuff with them.
Yeah, and it's really, really interesting. And you'll see, like even for sounds like where people pour water.
Yeah.
You know, they'll just, like, pour water in a glass or whatever, and then they'll overlay that. It's just, like, things that you would never think about, which are really interesting, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a huge window.
No, but that was interesting.
Really cool.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
And I think even though that doesn't really have anything to do specifically with top 40, I think that does sort of build into this idea of how music works in tandem with, like, your mentality.
Right.
With your thoughts. Now, one more thing that I want to bring up, and this is sort of harkening back more to the whole argument of is it good or is it not, and sort of separating subjective from objective.
Mm-hmm.
Like artists that I love listening to that I wouldn't consider, like, great musicians. I don't know who I would try and throw up on there at the first top, but, you know, I sort of am able to, like, not like I'm special, but, like, you know, I sort of am able to look at some of the music that I like and be like, okay, it's not great. Right. I like it, but I can understand why. It's from a musical standpoint with structure and everything, it kind of lacks that creativity, kind of like how you look at top 40 music. Like, I can see how other people like it and you're allowed to like it. Right. And some of it I like, but let's be realistic and look at it and be like, okay, just because a lot of people don't like it doesn't mean that other musicians are looking at it like, whoa, this is the most ingenious creative stuff ever.
Right. You know, to go on to that point real quick, not to cut you off, but, like, Chris from our rock band class,
right,
and, like, he's my private teacher for, like, 5 years. He would always get really frustrated when he was playing and somebody would request, like, a pop song, like modern pop, because he would just, like, he'd be like, man, the unfortunate reality of it, though, is, like, the reason why people don't necessarily like more complex music, and this is, like, his words in some fashion, basically, was that they're not exposed to it
right
at an age where you can appreciate it. So, like, their understanding of it is not there because they've never been exposed to it.
I think it also comes with like, for example, not everyone who listens to top 40 is going to be a musician. Most people that listen to top 40 aren't actual musicians.
Right.
What I'm trying to say going off of that is that, for example, me, I wasn't really a musician, like a musician, until, like, high school. That's when I decided, like, I want to go into music. I want to learn as much as I can about music and stuff. And so I was sort of the kind of person who would listen to top 40 and just listen to whatever was going on the radio and stuff up until about 7th or 8th grade. Right. And that's when I started to, like, actually go on YouTube and look up, like, I've always loved soundtracks. So, for example, like Lord of the Rings, which is what I'm about to bring up.
That's good music.
Which is what I'm about to bring up. Like Lord of the Rings, other soundtracks for, like, video game soundtracks and stuff. Stuff that still isn't complex. It just sounds a little bit more complex because they're using orchestras and stuff.
Do you like? Have you played Minecraft much? Like,
dude, Minecraft has such great music.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. Yeah.
It's kind of almost like Minecraft. It's perfect for Minecraft because it's very complex and beautiful music.
Right.
Being put through, like, I almost want to say disgusting sounding, like, effects and keyboard. Kind of like how Minecraft is a super creative world, but it's like 2-bit. Right.
Even Zelda has great music.
Oh yeah, dude, Zelda has great music. That's another great thing. Look at for shows that you like or movies or games that you like, look at the music and just listen to the music. Yeah, the soundtrack, especially with so movies and shows. Something that I've always wanted to do is compose. And so what I've been doing is every single time I watch something, especially if it has recurring themes like a longer TV show, I try and listen to the music. And sometimes I'll listen to it on its own, but I'll try and think about where it's cued. Oh, yeah. So you see how the music builds, swells, does what it does to, like, sort of support the visuals. Right. And so one of the movies that does that really well is Lord of the Rings. Yeah. Now, this isn't about the music, but what I want to ask is, I had an argument with one of my friends where she was like, I don't really like Lord of the Rings. I think it's boring and stuff. And I was like, I understand that. I'm okay with you not liking Lord of the Rings. What I'm trying to argue is that, can you at least look at Lord of the Rings and say that from an purely objective standpoint, that is one of the most impressive like movie trilogies ever, because of the work put in by the people, the CGI effects. She's like, I'm not going to agree to that. I just don't like it. And I was like, okay, I'm not asking you to like it.
Right.
I'm asking you to look at everything and see. And you know, I just didn't get anywhere with that conversation.
I still think Lord of the Rings is by far way better than Avatar, because I've heard that claim too.
Avatar, The Last Airbender?
No, not The Last Airbender. Avatar, like the blue people.
Oh, it is much better. And
like everybody.
Like that, well, that's the thing is like Avatar is actually such a it's visually like the spectacle is amazing and stuff, and like the plot is good enough for what it is. But if you actually look at it, it's really just a plot derived from other movies. Yeah, it's not like a special plot. It's literally just like, I think the main one's Dances with Wolves. It's literally just Dances with Wolves in space with aliens. And so, like, great movie, but like that's
take away from that.
Right.
The work on Lord of the Rings is insane.
And so, what I want to say is, not everyone has to like this movie. A lot of people don't, and I'm okay with that. But a number I want to bring up to you is the movie series over the course of like when it was like nominated for awards. It has been awarded or nominated, strictly nominated, a total of 800 times for awards. 800 different awards across the world from different, academies and everything. 800 different awards. In terms of the Oscars, I think it... I actually want to look up the exact number for the Oscars. The Oscars is also super impressive. I think a total of 30 from the Academy Award for the Oscars, and it won 17. But out of that 800 total nominations for awards, it won 475. It won over half.
That's pretty amazing, too, considering that it's such a niche film.
Yeah.
It's not like, it's like sci-fi, but it's
fantasy movie.
Fantasy,
yeah. It's fantasy movie.
So it's like, that's such a small niche of people that watch those type of stuff, just like superhero movies.
Like Game of Thrones.
Yeah, Game of Thrones, right. Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah, and so and those are often also, sort of related to each other. But, I mean, something I wanted to bring back is in that argument, can you say that you don't agree with the objective quality of a movie if it has 475 out of 800 awards?
Right.
And then that also brings up the Academy Awards, and we're also like a top 40.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, it's a popularity contest.
Yeah.
It's all about popularity.
So that's another thing. Can I say that this movie is one of the best just because it has 475 awards out of 800? Because other people, like a group of people with what they like there were still biases in those 475 awards.
So you know what the funny thing about that is I would say comparable would be like Harry Potter to Lord of the Rings. I would say they're on similar playing fields, like not necessarily
in terms of
fantasy and
okay.
So but if you look at Harry Potter, that's there's not a person that I can't think of that hasn't seen a Harry Potter movie or read a Harry Potter book.
Or at least heard of Harry Potter.
But Lord of the Rings is like that type of thing where... And if you think about the time frames and when they came out, they're relatively around the same time, too. Early 2000s,
Well, the movies, but...
Well,
Lord
the books
the books from Lord of the Rings are from...
Well, I mean, just if you're going based off the movies.
Yeah.
So, but, you take those... And it's so Harry Potter, again, is, so much more sellable. And, even today, there are so many things that think about, all the stuff that's still Harry Potter. They will not let that shit die.
Harry Potter World from Universal and
stuff. And they're making, another Harry Potter book or something. And it's supposed to be...
really?
Yeah, I can't remember what the perspective is supposed to be, but it's supposed to be not Harry's perspective, but somebody else's perspective. But basically, it's they just won't let that shit die. It's all about sellability,
They still have I think they still have Harry Potter Weekend on... it used to be ABC.
Oh,
remember ABC Family every weekend it's Harry Potter weekend. I'm like, yeah, it's every weekend. Just weekend. Call it the weekend now.
Yeah.
What are they now? Freeform? I don't know. Does Freeform still do Harry Potter?
Yeah, it's Freeform. Why did they change it? I don't get it.
Because they were getting okay, this is another follow the money thing. Is they were getting really, really well known for some of their shows. I think The Fosters was on it. And other drama shows like that, Secret Life of the American Teenager.
Yeah.
And so they're okay, we're kind of not really known for being that ABC family anymore, so we're going to change to Freeform, which literally kind of just means you sort of do whatever you want to put out.
Yeah, I can see that because they're not a family channel.
Yeah, they're not really a family channel anymore. So.
Yeah, there's some good shows on ABC Family.
And so that's why I wonder when. Okay, so this is another one. Top 40. Like one thing that you're starting to see a lot more, and it's definitely getting exploited, is the genre of rap. Right?
Yeah.
Rap started to become super, super popular. When did it like really start as a genre in like sort of our Western culture? Kind of like the 80s, maybe?
So the first ever rap song to be considered a rap song was Rapper's Delight. And that was the mix-off of Good Times by Chic. Have you ever heard that song?
I think so. When did it come out?
God, Rapper's Delight probably came out... That was considered the first rap song of all time, so...
And so, like, what I want to say with that is...
I think 80s is probably right about right.
And you're starting to see it happen with other genres, too, like
1980.
machine... Okay, yeah, so 1980. So in the 80s, you started to see rap sort of become more prevalent. And, of course, it has its sort of deep roots within Black American culture and stuff.
But you know what's different about it?
What?
None of the rapping was vulgar in the song, at least.
Interesting.
Like, if you listen to it, it's actually a 15-minute song. It's a long-ass rap song.
Okay. Interesting. But so you started to see it like around, I would say like the 90s is when, like late 90s, early 2000s is when it probably hit like its peak. When you started to see so many different genres, like Linkin Park, for example, did a whole bunch of rap.
Yeah.
And so
that's such a
now,
weird band, you know.
Yeah, Linkin Park is so weird. Yeah. It's so weird.
So good though.
And so anyway, in this rap sort of rise, you started to see it become a lot more fused with pop and stuff.
Right.
And nowadays, for at least for a while, a couple years before now, I would say, you pretty much had on every like top 40 song had a rap section. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And like each song had a rap remix with a rap part in it.
Yeah.
Like Dark Horse and stuff.
Yeah.
And actually, most of Katy Perry's songs had like a rap feature.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing about top 40 is that's it does funny. Also realize, like the thing about top 40 is it never changes in the way where it always changes right when like the taste starts to change. Like top 40 would be dead if they put all their eggs in the pop basket because they weren't even always pop. Like, most pop wasn't, like kind of rap wasn't starting to get popular until like the 80s with like Michael Jackson and stuff. So before that, the popular music was like your Frank Sinatra's and
it's like, interesting how that works.
Yeah.
Because like in the 80s, your pop music is like...
It's starting to become like the kids, like your indie. Yeah. It's your indie back then.
Like, think about like Tears for Fears was considered like indie pop music at the time. They have some really good music.
But they started to get more popular, so top 40 started to sort of choose that as their new sort of front.
Right.
And so right now we're in an era where like rap and EDM and just like a lot of electronic stuff in your music is the big sort of norm.
Right.
And like you sort of start, like Shawn Mendes will play a little bit of the guitar.
Yeah, I see that
but,
sometimes.
It's...
And then people they're like, oh my god, he's such a guitar player. I'm like, fuck off, please.
Another thing that I love about both Adele and Bruno Mars and Adele are probably like my two favorite like sort of top 40 like sort of what is the term when it's like guilty pleasures.
Oh yeah.
And it's because whenever I see them playing live, Adele is one just her like as a vocalist, she is exactly what you want to be. She's always got beautiful like form and stuff. She's not really moving. That's why she's not as much like a top 40 artist because she's not making a show out of it. She's literally just trying to show you her live performance of a song, and that's what I like.
It's not so much the spectacle.
And she's always got a full band behind her.
Right.
Same with Bruno Mars. Bruno Mars is like his band. I don't know if they have like a name. I think they just sort of go by Bruno Mars. Unlike the Jimi Hendrix Experience.
Right. Or like Huey Lewis in the News. Or like, yeah.
Did Bon Jovi have a name for his band, or was it sort of just Bon Jovi?
I don't know. Yeah, it's always weird to be like, Huey Lewis and the News. I don't know. Like, oh yeah, I'm just a part of the band.
But, yeah, so the top 40 is always changing with what they want to do. It's very much just a kind of format, and I think we're pretty much going to be done talking about this coming up, but I don't know, it's just kind of insane how much it sort of dictates the music world. And
legit. So we gave you the real tea.
Give you the real tea on this one. That's the thing, when we were talking about like those news articles, I was like, man, I'm really starting to like. I was just thinking about top 40 like the whole time. I was like, because we were also talking about most selling albums and stuff, and I was just, it's just kind of crazy how even music, which is supposed to be like one of the realest, like passion-based sort of professions, is still completely like run by business. Yeah. And stuff.
Sad, actually.
It's unfortunate. Hopefully, like, I feel like we are starting to sort of see a change in that. And another artist that I actually thought about bringing up when we were talking about style is someone who I think sort of embraces like the whole indie mentality, but is super beloved by the top 40. Billie Eilish. Oh. Because she is sort of like that completely ground built. Yeah. Like, it's just her and like her brother making all of their music. But
I'm not a big fan of her, but
I mean, you know, but like what I'm saying is like, you know, she's one of the most popular. I haven't heard much about her recently, honestly, in the past year. But
she's vegan. I like her because of that.
Okay. But you know, she's like one of the most popular artists of our current time.
I think it's the appeal, though. Is it her music or is it just her like kick-ass?
A lot of it is her. Okay, so that's the thing is a lot of people like musicians that I talk to like her because she's doing so many interesting things. And she is truly just kind of like her and her brother, the music they make, when you really look at it, like it kind of sounds like typical pop music. Yeah. And that's because all the stuff like on the surface seems like that. When you really start to look at for Ocean Eyes, for like her melodies and stuff, she didn't use auto-tune, which by the way, I'm okay with auto-tune if you're. That's another thing about top 40s. They abuse stuff like auto-tune to make an artist good. Like, people who like aren't good singers are still going to be big artists because they are able to use autotune. But she didn't use autotune. What she did was she took like 40 different vocal tracks and just cut them and placed them so that it all sounded like one nice like tone. Yeah. So like, you know, the stuff that like she's doing, it's all very impressive and it's all very interesting, like how she's making these sort of very, very standard pop songs. Mm-hmm. So the musicians that I talk to are always like, I like her music. The sort of more like, we have a couple friends in LCC who, they love her, but they love her. Like, her music is good and they appreciate it, but she is the, like, you know, she's the icon. Like, she's the whole pusher for that.
Yeah, I'm going to leave my comments to a minimum on Billie Eilish.
Okay. Yeah. You really against Billie Eilish?
No, man. It just goes in like I don't know. It's just like goes back to that whole thing where it's like, is it really talent or is it just iconic?
I think she's talented. Yeah. I think that I get annoyed at how much people sort of put her before her music and stuff, and sort of like how like for example, general admission tickets were like $200 to one of her concerts, and I was like, that is so fucking bad.
Yeah, look how much money she's making. She's rich.
Like, but like, and that's the thing. I guess I hate the idea of her. I love like her as a musician and like what she's doing. Yeah. But I just hate that sort of everything around her, the business part of it and stuff, right. and I think I don't know, her like style kind of like bugs me sometimes. Like she's like wearing like a life preserver. Yeah. I'm like, that's a bit much. Yeah. It's a bit much.
Yeah, not a fan of that. Whatever.
I don't know. Arnie, you got anything else to talk about? Real quick, any other anecdotes? All right. All right, well, thank you for joining us. This was a bit of a longer episode, but it's because it was more of a discussion format episode. We'll still try and keep more of our like news articles and other videos shorter for you, but thank you for joining us. We have been Eric and
Justin.
Thank you for joining us on the MuseTube podcast. Hope to see you next time. Peace.
See ya.